Hi, I'll pick up where I left off in the last video. So, Bach says you'll find it over short notes, and he cites that figure 47a, and you can see he shows two versions, and that as well is like an example that will go with what he said earlier in paragraph 31 and in paragraph 32, when it can occur over short notes, like the short appoggiatura can occur over short notes. So too can the Pralinen triller. So there you can see he shows two versions of short notes, that one has been, and the second one is shortened by an appoggiatura. And then with B, he says, or over notes which are shortened become short because of via an appoggiatura. And so you can see the F with the dot in figure B has the trill sign above it, and the appoggiatura is before it is the G. And that appoggiatura normally, according to the normal rule, will take up 2/3 of the note. So instead of that F being a dotted quarter note or dotted crotchet, that F then becomes an 8 note or a quaver. And it's because the G takes up 2/3 of its value. So the note, the F, becomes short because of the appoggiatura, and then you'll use the Pral trill. And Bach says, and therefore, when it also tends to occur, over, notes with a fermata, then one holds the appoggiatura completely long, and then just snapped, like completely briefly with this, snaps off with this Pral trill. In that one removes the finger from the tasta. And so this here is from my experience, this is a feature that Bach will be particularly fond of, and it occurs quite often in his pieces, at least the pieces that go with this book. So, and that'll be a way to perform it. You hold that appoggiatura completely long, longer than its written out value. You can see in C the appoggiatura has the value of a crotchet, but you'll hold that crotchet basically the entire length of the fermata. And it's only at the very end, when you are ready to lift your hand away from the keyboard, will you play that Pral trill. And that is that is a feature that is very much, if you were to hear Bach actually play, or you see him improvise or whatever, I'll bet you would see him at some stage do that. So this is a feature of the performance that Bach is sharing, and one he is particularly fond of, like a characteristic. If you think of, like guitar players, there'll be certain things that are like one can identify a guitar player with, certain licks on the guitar. And this would be like one of them with which you could identify Bach, and it is a good one, and it's something you can use. And as well with the law, you know, like with the rule of how the Vorschlag is performed, the appoggiatura will be forte, will be F, and then the Prall trill at the end will be quiet, ideally. But one is confronted with the limitations of the instrument. Some instruments are more limited than others, but in an ideal world you'll be playing that appoggiatura forte, and then in an ideal world you'll be performing that Prall trill completely quiet. Which will have been possible on the clavichord. And it's not the only time I don't think so. I don't think this is the only time he mentions this kind of lick, or what to call it that, which is basically what it is. To use guitar terms, that is what that is that Bach is talking about. It won't be the first time he mentions it, and it's it's like it'd be like if you do that the way Bach is talking about. It's like for anybody else who knows, let's say we're talking about knowing Bach personally or something, or if you do that, for others in the know, they'll go, yeah, you're a student of Bach's too, or you know Bach, don't you? It'll be like a calling card or something. Man findet ihn oft außer den Kadenzen und Formaten, bei Passagen, wo 3 oder auch mehrere Noten heruntersteigen. Figur 48. Und, weil die Natur eines Trillers ohne Nachschlag hat, welcher sich herunterneiget, so ist wie dieser, in Fällen anzutreffen, wo auf lange Noten kurze hinterherfolgen, wie wir Tab 5 bei Figur 49 sehen. So here's figure 48, and you can see, just like he says, you'll find it where 3 or more notes descend. And there he gives, there's the first example. You can see the middle note, because it can only occur before a followende seconde. So that F in the first bit of that first example, or part of example figure 48, the F before the E makes that E a followende seconde, and the Prall trill is over that E. And then again in the next figure of 3, it's the same. And the same with the next one too. You have the descending movement. And again in the next one. And I find it a bit like I don't have an answer for this, why he included the last one, because it's very identical to the first part of that figure 48. But I could maybe guess, one of my guesses would be that he shows that even though there's a leap upwards, which one might think an upward leap might cancel out the, the pral trill, that he shows that it doesn't, that you can still have a pral trill and those 3 descending notes, even though it's preceded by a leap upwards. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say about that. I have a feeling there might be more to say about it, but right now I don't have anything else to say about it. And then we have figure 49. And so one of the things that Bear and Ryder did, like what they did extra, so they presented the facsimile of the first edition that appeared in 1753. And they present as well the notation of the examples and notes that came too, and as well they provided the list of printing errors that came with the book. So whenever there was a mistake in the text, it was listed on that list, so you can check and you'll find the mistakes then in the text, and you can correct them yourself then if you want. So they provide that. And what else they provide is they, like I said before, they transpose those musical examples into, the treble clef, into modern print, whatever you'd call it. And, they added their beautiful introduction, and they have an index at the back. The thing with Bear and Ryder is, that other thing, manipulating the text, that was dishonest. And, that was done deliberately. Whoever did that, and I'm not talking about anybody who got, afterwards fooled or duped by that, what they did. Whoever actually did that, they knew what they were doing. That was a deliberate lie. If you think of, it doesn't matter. What Bear and Ryder are doing, this is not it's not about dishonesty. That's just about, well, you can decide what caused that. Yeah, so it's not disgusting in terms of dishonest and this whatever. It's just, they would have needed somebody like a grown up among them to, tell them something. But they didn't have it, so that's what they ended up with. And so this example here, it drags out, but what can I do? It's not my fault. I would think it's not my fault. So in this example that Bach provides for figure 49, when he says that because it has the nature of a trill without a Nachschlag, which has a tendency to, you know, lean downwards, it can occur in cases where short notes follow long notes. And there's the example, and here it is on the screen as Bärenreiter transposed it. And Bärenreiter got it wrong. They have the trill sign over the B flat. But that is incorrect. It doesn't belong over the E flat. It belongs over that third. If you look at the bass, the lower voice, it belongs over the third C of that bar, or over, you know, and which would has the E over it. In Bach's example, it's a little offset in the one he wrote, but he has the trill sign over that C. That's where that Prall trill belongs. And they got it wrong. And remember, they were congratulating Bach. They put themselves in a position where they deemed themselves, you know, able to correct Bach, to judge him, to tell him to Bach, well done, Bach. You can be proud of yourself. There were practically no mistakes in your homework. Here, come here, sit at the top of the class. You deserve it. The top of my class. Bach had to write the entire book. He had to come up with the examples. He had to do everything. What they had to do was, you take those notes of Bach's original example and you just move them down a third. So you count 1, 2, 3 and move the note down. That's what they did when they transposed that. And they were talking about the previous paragraph and correcting Bach's mistakes, that he doesn't know what a fallende sekunde is and that he doesn't know what before and after means. And I've said it all anyway. So this is another proof that they have absolutely no understanding at all of what Bach is talking about. Because if they were to look at that, to look at how they presented it there, they should immediately, you know, I mean, these are your experts. These are Lilliput's experts. Everybody, and when I say you, I'm not necessarily talking to you who's watching this video. I'm talking to the you out there, the you who make society what it is, who vote, who decide, who agree unanimously or through common consensus that yes, these are our betters, these are our representatives. If we look for answers, we go to them and ask them. And they have just been correcting Bach on the previous paragraph. And on this one, they can't even get their bit right. And in comparison to the task Bach had, this is, you know, simple as can be. And they get it wrong. And you can see from that they have no conception of what it is Bach is talking about. That's who you're listening to, somebody with no conception of what Bach is talking about, yet they will not hesitate for a second to correct him and send you off in completely the wrong direction. Their alarm bells, the editor should have looked at that and say, hold on a second, that can't possibly be right, that Prall trill over the B flat. Because as we so expertly corrected, it can only happen after a fallende sekunde. So even in their reality, in their cage, the B flat didn't come after a fallende sekunde. And in the case of Bach as well, it didn't come before a fallende sekunde. That is a leaping diminished fifth, that B flat. It is not a steigende sekunde, it's not a fallende sekunde. It's not an ascending second, it's not a descending second, it's a leaping diminished fifth. So they should know, hold on, it's impossible. It is absolutely impossible. Like immediately. Alarm bells should have been ringing immediately. And how do I spot it? Because alarm bells rang immediately. I did not scour over the original example with a like a magnifying glass and looking for any possible mistake. I immediately saw this cannot be right. There cannot be a trill on that B flat. That is impossible. And there is not. It's incorrect. It's completely wrong. That trill belongs on, it is just like that example. There in figure 47b, where he says it can occur over long notes that are made short by appoggiatura. That E is made short by that appoggiatura. That appoggiatura, the F before it, that's the length of a quarter note. And what you have left is then the E as a 16th note at the very end. And with that E as the 16th note, before that E comes the prowl trill, and then the short notes that follow. And that is the correct version of that example. Yeah, so you can see from that, Bear and Writer have no clue what they're talking about. They can act all like superior and correct Bach on the one hand, and then in the next instant, I mean, that'll be the job of the editor to spot these things. In the next instant, they can't even spot the most glaring, obvious mistake, something that jumps out of you if you've really, like, if you listening or taking away anything that Bach is saying. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So that's how that's meant to be played. The way it's written in there is completely incorrect. And you might look at that and think of the text, what Bach says, and just like, you know, a trill without a Nachschlag has a tendency to descend, and you might think, hold on, it's not descending, there's a leap there. And you might think, why is there a leap there? And one could look at figure 28D from the paragraph 16, and in there Bach is talking about, you know, trills that don't have a Nachschlag, and so when short notes follow that don't have a Nachschlag, and you can see that one example, he gives a few, but if that one example is the same idea, you have the trill on the A, and then the notes that follow, they leap upwards, but they are descending. There is a descending line. And with those examples, Bach as well will provide an example of a trill without a Nachschlag, where there's short notes following, and those notes do descend from the A, like go G, F, and E, that they descend down. And so in figure 49, you could imagine that Bach could have easily introduced an example where the notes do in fact descend from the E, so that it does go D and C following. But by providing that example, while it might not fit to the text, if he provided an example that fit exactly to the text, you would see that fit into the text, but you'll never know then that in the case where there's a leap, and that as well can have the prowl trill, i.e. a trill without a Nachschlag, can happen there you know, because there, even though there's a leap, but that there's a descending, you know, that there's a descending line after the trill without a Nachschlag. You're getting that answer too, aside from the obvious. So by providing that, Bach is telling you more. He's helping you out in situations where you might be lost, thinking, well, he said that, but what about this one? So that might be there for that, you know, when he's not around to tell you, to help you out, he has in fact helped you out because he has taught about it. He has taught more about it. So yeah, you can look at figure 28D and consider it with respect to that. And so the way to play it is that Prall trill is over the E, the appoggiatura is held for the entire length of the first E. There's as well the examples in the appoggiaturas that I covered, you know, ones to take note of, where the appoggiatura takes up the entire value of, when the note is tied, it takes up the entire value of the first note of the first of the two tied notes. And this will be a case of that, exactly the same, one of these instances that Bach had said, these are noteworthy. And if you had heeded Bach and actually did pay attention to them, you would see that this is another case of that occurring. And you will understand that that is exactly where the Prall trill occurs, namely before a followende secunda. Because what's the followende secunda here? It's the E. And what makes it a followende secunda? It becomes a followende secunda via the F, the appoggiatura before it. The appoggiatura before it makes it a followende secunda, and the Prall trill comes before the followende secunda. So it is exactly there where Bach says it can only occur, and it does not occur on that B flat. So there's one paragraph left before the chapter on trills is finished. Yeah, you can decide what level Lilliput is at. And remember, these are the experts. These are the roll of honor. These are your champions. It's pretty pathetic if your champions, let's say it's, like combat sports, and you have your hero you're rooting for, and he's facing his opponent, and far from, like being a formidable opponent, that he's just wasting, he gets in the ring and wastes the time of the person he's facing, of challenging. That's not a great result. And they are how could they put something so embarrassing in a publication, considering it, because they have no conception of how little they know. They have none. That's why they had no problem correcting Bach, thinking they were in a position to correct them. Because they don't know. They do not know they are in the cage. They do not know that they are Lilliput. They think what they know is worth something. But you can see on the levels on which it failed. And they're, and where it leaves them. Do you really think they understand anything of what Bach is talking about based on that? and that mistake, they couldn't even bother, they couldn't even check that they get it right after that, after correcting Bach. And then in the next paragraph, they get it wrong and make a glaring mistake. Not like an oversight, but a mistake that shows they know nothing. They are clueless. They walk into it blind. They make fools of themselves. Yeah, so I'll be finishing that last paragraph. And that'll be the chapter on trills. Yeah, and you can catch them. You can catch Bärenreiter, maybe, or the editors, all these experts. Maybe you'll find them on, the TED Talks, or in some high-profile forum, and you can listen to their words of wisdom there. Well, yeah, it doesn't make me happy. I mean, if I was there, I don't know. If I was going for an interview, let's say with Bärenreiter, and they asked me how would you fit to this company, or I mean, what could I say to them? How could I answer that? Honestly, the honest answer is I don't fit. Because I'm not as stupid as they are. Therefore, I'll be completely the odd one out. Nobody will like me because they'll all feel stupid around me. They'll all feel like nothing ever comes out of their mouth except complete crap. I'll have to say that. Or I could lie and say, well, I know how to talk. I know how to be an idiot and talk in that way that makes people believe I'm not an idiot. I'm so conceited, I have such an arrogant opinion of myself that I'll consider myself to know more than Bach. And it won't register in my mind whatsoever that Bach's achievements could in some way equate to the fact that maybe, perhaps, with a wild stretch of imagination, that he might be more intelligent than me, that he might know more than me. I will never consider that for a second. I do not need to have done a fraction of what he's done. And I'll still think I'm superior to him. At the drop of a hat. I'll only need to look at something and think, hold on, that doesn't make sense. Bach is wrong. Bach's an idiot. And do you think they're able to look at that Prall and the Doppelschlag, and they'll have the insight and the powers of being able to consider and wonder and come up with the right answer? Do you want to trust them after that? And do you think anybody else is better? I've shown you Edition Shot, Bärenreiter. I mean, G. Henley for Lag will have their turn. Do you think any of them are better? If you do, yeah, well, I don't know how to end it. It's annoying. It really is annoying. Well, it shouldn't be possible for me to dismantle them the way I do so easily and without even looking. I'm just going along my way and they are throwing their idiocy at me as I go along. I don't even have to seek it out. It's not like a needle in a haystack. It's like, how do you get this stink out of here? That's what their influence is like. It's not like searching far and wide to try and find a gotcha moment. It's like, how do I get their stink out of the room? Somebody open a window. Because it's everywhere. I mean, you're talking about people who lived in ancient Rome, ancient Greece, who still kind of belong to, the pinnacle of intelligence and ingenuity and genius. And yet, we can think that people in 1753 were complete imbeciles. And the ironic thing is, Lilliput is thinking about themselves. Eventually, they all turn on each other and ravish each other. And they turn on their own kind. The Lilliput of 1753, in the minds of Lilliput now, were imbeciles, were morons, were complete simpletons, couldn't do the simplest things. And the Lilliput now accept that. They think, yes, they couldn't. That's why we're great. And we're much more evolved than they are. Because they can't do things that we find easy. Therefore, we are great. Yet, Pythagoras. Had Pythagoras not done what he did, let me see Lilliput do what Pythagoras did. Lilliput think they turn on themselves and they have no idea they are Lilliput. The cage, that's the how difficult the cage is. It's invisible. The bars of it are invisible. And you're not going to believe me that you're in a cage or that the cage exists. But I do not say things just for the sake of saying them. I say them because I observed them. I don't make them up. I observe them and then I say what I observe. And I spend a long time observing them. I don't see something. I don't jump to conclusions like Bärenreiter did. I examine the text. I find out. I assume that I am incorrect and Bach is correct. And that helps me find the right answer. Because I do not assume. Let's say I look at it from 7 different angles to try and find out, like, why do I not get this? Why do the pieces not, the puzzle not add up? I do not assume that I've exhausted all my options. I keep looking. But, people are not interested in that. This is, what I do is not the thing. What Bärenreiter do, what Lilliput does, that's the thing to praise. That's the thing to flock around. How come, if you're in Lilliput, you flock towards other people in Lilliput when there's people like Bach, when there's giants existed in the world who you could follow, and yet you gravitate to all the little pygmies that turn up? Don't think a pygmy can't write a book. Don't think pygmies can't publish books. They do. Don't think pygmies can't write introductions to books. They can. How come the people flock? It's because they recognize it. They don't. It's like, in orcas in captivity. If a free orca was, an orca from the wild was talking to an orca in captivity, they might talk, and let's say the orca in captivity is there with their kid. It's a parent and a kid, and the orca in the wild is talking about what it's like in this ocean. And he goes away, and then the child, the kid orca, will say to their parent, to its parent, what was that guy talking about? And the parent will say to him, never mind, it was nothing. It was all nonsense. Because, did you notice he never once mentioned the bucket of fish? And the kid orca will say, yeah, that's right, he didn't say anything about a bucket of fish. And the parent orca will say, well, without that bucket of fish, you can't survive. You need that bucket of fish. If that bucket of fish is gone, there is nothing left. And he didn't mention that bucket of fish once. So you can see everything he was saying is nonsense. And then the kid orca will accept that and go on and forget about everything the free orca said about the ocean and the wild and what the world outside the cage is like, because it meant nothing to the captive orca, because they only understand the cage. The only thing of value is if they hear what they know, said back to them. That way they can determine if somebody is worth listening to or not. And if that person is talking about things that they don't have no conception of their existence, well, then that person isn't saying anything at all relevant. Because in the case of me, I'd be relevant if I talked about finger exercises, if I talked about rotation, if I talked about all those techniques that you find in the bargain bin. If you have anything to do with the piano, you will have heard them all. And yet they're still being said on YouTube, on all these places. They're still being said as if they're valuable information. But the truth is that it's information that's as common as muck. The dogs on the street will tell you to use finger exercises or rotation or tapping or grouping or whatever it is. Metronome work, counting out loud, hands separately, all of that. The dogs on the street will be able to tell you to do all that. And you'll be waiting for me to tell you to do that as well before you will say, yes, this person knows what he's talking about. And because I don't, you'll dismiss me as being completely irrelevant. Because I have to know what you know for it to be worth anything, and you have no conception that what you know is worthless. That what you know belongs to the cage. It keeps you in the cage. And the orca does not understand that when he is outside of the cage, in the ocean, in the world, that bucket of fish becomes pathetic, completely superfluous. It's something to laugh at. It's so irrelevant to life. And he will find in the ocean, there's plenty of fish in the sea. And yet he is, waiting for a measly bucket of fish. And that's what he's waiting for the wild orca to tell him about, the measly bucket of fish. Just like you're waiting for me to tell you about the measly metronome or the measly grouping things. To think, oh, maybe I'll try, maybe there is a cage and maybe I'll try escape it. No, if there's no metronome waiting for me outside the cage, if there's no grouping, if there's no counting out loud, well, I'll have nothing to do there. There'll be nothing there in the world of music if I can't take those things with me. But if you can't take those things with you because they belong to the cage. So you can only have them if you stay in the cage. But, that's the thing. That's how tricky the cage is. That's how it remains invisible. And it is absurd that, you have your knowledge and it's gotten you where you are now. I'm not going to, tell you where that is. You can decide for yourself where that is. But the fact is That knowledge, what you know, has you where you are. And you might believe that it can't be better than that. But if you're not better than kissing, it can be better than that. You could use that as a guideline. You can say to yourself, okay, so what's Alan saying? He's saying that if I'm not better than kissing, well, then I'm not as good as I could be. So where has your knowledge taken you? Has it taken you there? And what are you so loyal to your information for? Think of where it takes you. Do you ever are you sick of practicing with the metronome? Are you sick of not being able to play a piece from beginning to end? Are you sick of working months? You know, there's a certain, it's like cleaning, you know, there's a certain, you absolve yourself from your sins when you do a hard day's work. But is there not a point always where you get a bit of a high from that? And you get to feel tired and like happy that you've worked hard and you deserve to be tired. But is there not a point where you start to think, where's the results? Where the lack of results gets to you, and where the metronome work, where all that just starts to feel like a chore. And there is no joy in it. It's just a chore. And what do you get afraid of then? Only people in the cage will get afraid of the music becoming, the pieces they play becoming stale, because that is part of the playing notes. They get stale, they're dead, they're empty, they're flat, there's nothing there. The only thing what you are mistaking as musicality or music is volume control. And we'll be talking about that in the next paragraph. Bach will talk about it, and I'll have something to say on that topic too. So the thing is, it's a YouTube video. Nothing can happen to you. If you want to click off, but don't click off because you're afraid or you feel fear. And don't mistake that fear with thinking, oh, I don't like this. Because fear, like I said about arrogance and ignorance, that they're not your friends. Neither is fear, because there is a fear that's healthy. Like when there's real danger, that fear is a good thing, and it's a good thing to listen to. But there's a sneaky fear, a fear that disguises itself. You can see that, like in piano terms, there will be people who'll say, oh, I don't like Liszt. And I'm not saying there's nobody who doesn't like Liszt, like that's not legitimate. But there will be people who don't like Liszt because they're afraid of him, because they're afraid of the virtuosity and all, and they take refuge in saying to themselves, I don't like this, because it means they don't have to face it. And they're afraid of facing the prospect of just not even knowing where to begin. Because Liszt is not good for the metronome. Bach is great for the metronome. Mozart's great for the metronome. When the false idols that exist in the cage, but not the real Bach or Mozart or Beethoven, they're not great for the metronome. But in the cage, you need the metronome. You need the pieces that can be typewritten. And that fear, when it's fooling you into, it disguises itself. It's a wolf's in sheep's clothing. It's thinking it's just personal preference. No, I don't like this. But in fact, it's not that you don't like it. It's you're scared of it. And that does you no favors, because if you're scared of it and it's not something that's actually dangerous, well, that fear is your enemy. Because you're scared of it, because you're afraid of losing what you have. But if what you have gets you nowhere, why are you loyal to it? What are you holding on for? Is it, you know why? It's weird. Most people are loyal to the things because it's the first thing they heard, which is, you know, when you think about it, it's absurd. It's completely, it's coincidence. What you heard first is random. It's arbitrary. You could have heard any of a number of things first, but it's because you heard it first, you're most loyal to it. But you should ask yourself, why am I loyal to this if I'm unhappy, if I'm not making progress, if I still can't play a piece from beginning to end? I've been practicing with the metronome for 10 years now, and I still can't play a piece to the end. Why am I loyal to this? Why do I keep going back for more when it fails me every single time? And I'm not better than kissing. And am I loyal to it? Is there any other reason other than the fact it's the first thing I ever heard? Is there any other reason why I'm loyal to it other than that? Yeah, well, okay. Bye. Thanks.